everyone, and welcome to the Biollywood podcast, where we explore biological threats in pop culture and what they teach us about real-world biodefense. I'm J.T. O'Brien, Associate Director of Research at the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense at the Atlantic Council, which is part of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. I'm joined by our Director, Dr. Asha M. George.
Hi.
And our Associate Director of Government Relations and Policy, Rob Bradley.
Hello there.
Today, we're unpacking 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which came out just this January in 2026. And it is the middle chapter of this highly anticipated new trilogy. The film is directed by Nia DaCosta and is written by Alex Garland, who has also done the previous films.
Mm-hmm.
The previous films reintroduced us to this ravaged landscape of post-outbreak Britain. And The Bone Temple shifts its focus a little bit toward the bizarre, kind of terrifying societies that have kind of emerged following this outbreak, and also kind of shows us a little bit about the evolutionary leaps of the rage virus itself. So this is a spoiler alert. If you have not seen 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, or 28 Years Later, Sans Bone Temple, and if you have not seen 28 Days or 28 Weeks, I am sure that those spoilers will come up.
Mm-hmm.
So this is your final warning, and from this point forward, those are on the table. So one thing I wanted to start with, I think, with this particular film, there wasn't as much about the biology, again, kind of similar to the first film.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was really interesting, again, was like the societal impacts and kind of how people react in these different situations, and how a society kind of forms and how we kind of get back to like base human nature when we're talking about some of these, apocalyptic scenarios. So I'm just kind of curious for y'all's initial thoughts on kind of that difference that we saw with this film and how you kind of thought it was different from the first film, the first 28 years, and then also 28 Days.
Well, I guess I would start off by saying that this movie could theoretically be watched without having seen the previous film, but I think you are doing yourself a major disservice if you don't watch the first one. I think it's telling that Spike, who by all appearances is the protagonist of the first film of 28 Years Later, takes a very clear backseat in this film to the two co-leads of the movie, Dr. Kelson and Jimmy Crystal.
Right.
And I think it's important for folks who are going in to see this movie understand that you're missing something. I think if you see the film without having seen that previous one, both in terms of the storytelling and the characterization that's involved, because you don't really, I don't think people would be rooting for Spike so much in this film if they hadn't seen the previous film.
Exactly.
But also because there's some things that I think we learned about this disease in the previous film that I think are relevant or at least are foreshadowed in the previous film that I think kind of come to the fore in this film. And so I think it is important. I actually did think that this movie talks more about the biological piece of the infection, or at least speaks to it a little bit more than the previous one did.
I definitely appreciated the attention and the time dedicated to Dr. Kelson kind of trying to figure out what this infection, just the nature of the infection. He's not even trying to identify or characterize what it is. He's just trying to figure out, okay, what are the underlying physiological symptoms that are going on? What are the psychological stressors, the physiological ones, and he kind of goes down this, emotional, goes down this methodical approach. So I think you're right. That was really interesting.
But to speak to your question, it has been interesting. While they showed different aspects or different approaches, I think, to society, all of these movies are commentaries on society.
Right.
In that very first one, we get at, the notion of loneliness and this, crazy thing and how people respond to it. It's not so much the society of the infected, it's the society of everybody else responding to and dealing with the infected, and how much of like awful human nature comes out, and how we contribute or cater to some of that, just sort of in the name of survival. And then, each one of these movies, I felt like, okay, so now we're looking at it from this angle, and now we're looking at it that angle. There's the one where we've just, the world seems to have just said, okay,
you're on
an island. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
NATO's going to float around a little bit and try and provide some security, but otherwise, we're out. And now in this one, And I guess in the previous one, we were beginning to angle towards this
Toward the
in
end.
terms of the alphas and like what's happening with the actual infected. And you see now there are societal elements or characteristics of them, and then we really see it in this movie.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. It's not the same. It's just not the same commentary or the same model every single time. And interesting in also in that it implies that there's still something left of
Yeah.
what we consider to be human, even with all the horrible behavior. It's still being in a society is still a human thing. At least I think
Right.
it is.
And I think the like the quote from the doctor was the infection is above the brain, or kind of over the brain. Like the brain is still underneath, so it hasn't. It's not damaging the brain. It's just masking.
By the way, I do want to say what was striking to me, especially the imagery at the end of the film, with the cross, the inverted cross,
Yeah.
and how deeply Jimmy Crystal, the villain, was kind of leaning into the religious elements. Obviously in a very twisted way. Kelson was reaching for faith in his own way here
100%.
throughout the film. He was hoping that there was something left under that infection in Samson's brain. This was his, not necessarily his redemption, but his way to bring meaning back to his life beyond the ossuary. And I think it was a very interesting comparison between the two. That's why I consider them to be co-leads.
Yeah.
These are people who are reaching.
He says he's
for,
an atheist, and the other guy's like, I'm a Satanist.
He was reaching in his own way,
Right.
to something that was unknowable except through, the application of his scientific method. But even when he administered the drugs, the psychotropic drugs,
He was on faith.
He wasn't sure that it would work.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, a really cool element to this film that they explored that. It was a very personal film for these two gentlemen.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've really taken note of. There's a lot of questions I continue to have about the infected, about the infection. And these movies aren't really answering that because they are lasering in on these individuals and their stories,
Right.
and how they are moving around each other.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's like, especially, Dr. Kelson. I think you can clearly see, like, yes, he's applying a scientific method. He's trying things, but that emotional piece is a huge part of the film. You see him dancing with Samson. You could kind of see him kind of like, not like falling for him in a romantic sense, but falling for him in a hopeful,
Clinging to the
faithful
hope of it,
sense.
yeah.
Like, oh, there's like, I might be able to get out of this loneliness. I might be able to actually fix somebody finally, and
And do my job.
and
as
do
a
my job
doctor,
as a
yeah.
doctor.
I think there's so much trauma response in all of these
Yeah.
movies. I just think it's really interesting. And if we look at the stress, in the military, we'd call it combat stress reaction, right? Which is what you get like during stressful or traumatic situations. It's only afterwards that you get to the PTSD part, the post. But I think Kelson's response to this trauma responses are, okay, first, in a lot of ways, he's given up
Yeah.
faith, right? So he's running around killing everybody because he thinks if you kill the host, then we can get rid of the virus, or that's it. Then we can all go on with our lives.
Right.
But another response is, well, actually, no. I think we can. I have a theory. I have a hypothesis. I can maybe split a very complicated disease presentation into 3 buckets, and I can treat 1 or 2 of them, and then we can see, and and then you have this loneliness thing, and is he in the dance? I didn't think, to me, when I was watching, it was almost as if he was trying to pull that humanity back out
absolutely.
of Samson.
I interpret it as this is him feeling the first time like his own humanity
It could
with
be
another human being or something like that.
I think there's a little bit of both there. I think there's an element of him trying to have a human connection with someone after so many decades in isolation.
Yeah.
I think there's that piece, but I think part of that is him trying to pull the humanity out of his
Yeah.
partner,
Yeah.
out of Samson, so that he can engage with it.
Right. And he
So-
does say multiple times, like, oh, there's just something under there, even before he's about to euthanize him. If
Yeah,
he just
yeah.
showed me one thing.
Just
and-
one little thing.
one little
and,
thing.
he obviously is visibly moved when Samson says moon. right?
Yeah.
You know, that because that's
Which
what he had been.
was a little ridiculous
for.
to me, but okay. No, I mean, look, he recognized the moon, so I would expect something different from
Like,
a
no.
medical doctor, but of
But-
course he'd been traumatized and he'd been alone all this time, except for Spike.
But what I will say is that regardless of the ridiculousness of the situation, for me as a father, what was really cool was, the first word sounds we can make as children are da 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 ma ma ma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the idea that they've I don't know if this is intentional or not, if Garland wrote it this way, but the idea that this is an individual who has not spoken in decades, an actual word, and his first word is a m sound. And so when I heard it in the theater, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. It's a very easy word to say if you are not familiar with making
I didn't even
words.
identify it as moon
So-
when I first heard it. I thought it was mund or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. So
Think, even in this conversation, we were talking a lot about, you're saying like the virus or whatever, the disease is sitting on top of the brain.
yeah.
We're talking about base human behavior, stuff to do with the amygdala, stuff to do with the ancient part of the brain. What parts of the brain start speaking? It's not executive function up here,
No,
right?
it's
It's something
stuff
much
back here.
deeper somewhere
Yeah.
else, and it's tied to what you see and how you feel about the people who are taking care of you and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think all of that is really interesting. And then you have the interaction of whatever's causing the disease. I don't know that, have we determined it's a virus?
Well, it was Ebola based.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
okay, so we're saying it's a virus, but it's interesting to me how much emphasis they're placing on the brain in this.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating, but there are other traumas that we're seeing too, and I think especially in this movie, there's Spike, just endlessly traumatizing himself with Jimmy and his gang.
I mean, think
and the
about it. Would you
skinny
rather
and
be
all
with
that.
Jimmy or out in the wild with the
Well, I'm
infected?
sure
I
he
would be
was
more afraid
asking
of the,
himself that question.
Yeah.
I think he appreciated the assist at the end of the last film, but I think he would have rather just gone on his way,
Yeah.
merry way, and lived alone in
But
the forest.
Interesting. What are his choices? His family of origin was like, ugh, he wanted to leave that, and his father wasn't great in his opinion and trying to save his mother. So we have the trauma of the mother passing away,
And he was a child when this was all.
and he was he's still a child.
Still a child.
You know,
Yeah.
and then
The
if you
Teletubby
consider-
stuff was all. Yeah.
That's right. Plus, don't we say, doesn't science say now that the brain isn't actually fully grown or developed or baked until you're 26?
Something like
Yeah,
that.
and-
This
it
kid
can
is
be-
13 or something.
It can be
he's still-
delayed or stunted too if you have
Yeah.
that kind of trauma.
And then if you have the virus just like endlessly in there, there's that, and then Jimmy's own
Yeah.
trauma.
Jimmy
All
Crystal
of
is
that
full
was,
of trauma.
a reaction to his pastoral father.
Yeah.
Turning into this horrible person, and Jimmy as a child trying to make sense of it. And of course it makes sense. He flipped all the way over to, well, he must be Satan and I am the son of Satan, and thus we go. There's just so much of that all over the place, as opposed to just the standard zombie movie or whatever kind of movie, if it's not technically a zombie, where everybody's just running around without explanation. And yeah, you have some people who are maybe afraid.
Right.
And then that's it. There's not all this complex interplay. It does make me wonder, though, I would like to throw this out, that should they be able to get the virus under control or eliminate it entirely, will we not have an entire population, all of whom have been traumatized in a really deep way? And will we not have to mobilize assets just to help them get through this traumatic, horrifying event? Because it's so
Yeah.
many people.
And I think that's an excellent point, because I think and there were a few things, and I don't know, maybe this is just my own bias coming in. A few parts of this film that I think did connect with COVID, and that was one of them. What happens to the next generation when you have this kind of an event and that causes that kind of much emotional trauma? What happens to children who are doing it, virtual learning? What happens to their, growth, education, things like that?
Well, the little girl at the end seemed to be
Well,
highly well educated
Well,
by
that's-
Cillian
well,
Murphy.
yeah,
Well, that's
Yeah.
because she was living in isolation,
yeah,
right?
and she had a very smart father, or a father figure, I should say.
Uh-huh.
But I think it speaks a lot to that. It speaks a lot to that, like what happens to the next generation, and it is showing us extremes. compared to what we saw with something like COVID.
Yeah.
But, I think there are going to be studies for decades until we're all dead on what the psychological impacts of that were.
I think too,
on society just writ large.
We have the issue in this movie of if we go back to one of the other movies where it's clear that the world exists and outside of all of this, and somebody has just decided we're cutting them off. What does that do to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about government policy. We would say, is that a good government policy? It's a terrible interpersonal policy. We're just letting people, go. But we do it now. Is it okay to do that in the name of public health to protect other populations? And we were talking about saving the whole rest of the earth. Maybe that's okay. But then at the same time, if you really feel that way, there are other movies where someone says we're dropping the bomb.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit when we did the episode for 28 Years Later. We said, we talked about from a government policy perspective, it is terrible policy to just quarantine off an entire island full of millions of people with a virus that was genetically engineered in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is clearly demonstrated over the course of a couple decades now in the film's time frame that it can mutate. And just let it fester there for years. That's just terrible policy. And to your point, Asha, if you are going to say we have given up on the island of Britain, then yes, you finish the job. You don't just leave people there to suffer, die, and mutate.
Right. And have, what happens with this virus? Obviously, nobody's even there to study it, not really.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if it's zoonotic and goes the other direction and suddenly it's in birds? We know birds are flying all over the world. So we're just leaving, we're just leaving this incubation situation, and there are other animals or birds or fish. Like, we don't know what could pick it up and take it somewhere, but it is the nature of viruses to do that.
Absolutely.
Right? If I always say I don't want to humanize the virus too much, but the idea is to survive, and if it's killing the host all the time, that's not good. That's when we see viruses mutate to allow for some more survival of the hosts, so that they can, the virus can continue to propagate. In this case, you would expect at some point everybody is going to be infected with the virus, and then it's going to want to go somewhere else. It's going to have to go somewhere else. Therefore, it's going to have to change to be able to infect. And we see in all these movies, there are other animals and things.
Yeah, they usually will always have a shot of another animal or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't catch one in this one, but I think in the first one,
I think they're always birds.
I think there's a raven or something.
Yeah,
a blackbird
something like
poking at a dead person, an infected person, I think, that was hanging upside down. And they actually, I believe, Aaron Taylor Johnson and his character and Spike were keeping their distance from the bird, because the bird, as we've established, we need to be careful about whether or not they carry blood on them.
Right.
They could potentially be a carrier for this disease.
I think another good point about abandoning the island and not understanding what's happening and not finishing the job. Another piece is like even setting up basic comms, I think, on the island would have just been a monumental advantage. Because think about it now, if this thing spreads to another Europe, say it just goes over to France, and now they have no idea how to deal with it. Had they had comms set up, maybe they could have been talking to Dr. Kelson, and he's like, "Oh, I figured these things out." I mean, these are kinds of the same things that we do in more remote areas of the world.
That's actually
you have to listen to the local people. They know things, and they might not be able to explain why, because they don't have the scientific equipment.
You don't give a group of people that you've cut off comms, I guess.
Well, no, but
you don't want to hear from them.
Well, what you could do is you could identify through satellite imagery settlements that have developed and seem to be stable over on the island, and you approach those settlements from afar and you say, "Listen, if you agree to take this comms, and to give us updates on how things are going over there, we will send you air supply drops in exchange. Quid pro quo." They might be upset that you've cut them off, but they'll take the supplies if it means.
So I mean, that brings us to the question of why
what is the rest of the world doing?
What is the rest of the world doing, and
I think
why
that's
are
the
they
big
cutting them
question.
off to that point that we
Yeah.
don't even want to know what's happening with
Yeah,
you?
because you're
I
absolutely
think
right. From a
they've
surveillance
so-
perspective,
Right,
we
yeah.
absolutely want to know what's happening.
You know, we talk about faith. I think they have truly given up, and they have just decided they're dying anyway. Even though it's taking decades, apparently, they're dying anyway. So why bother? But I think it's wrong. And I also think even if you don't care about these people, you truly believe they're gone. At the same time, there is a raging, horrible, terrible, life-altering, planet-altering disease somewhere, and you know exactly where it is. Why are we not going over somehow to get specimens?
Especially as long as it's isolated
Yeah.
before it spreads. I mean,
Yeah.
You know,
send-
if you don't want to bring it back, like for us, if you don't want to bring
Yeah.
those specimens back to the United States, okay. And if you don't want to have a laboratory sitting, you don't want to go to Porton Down,
right.
also okay. But you don't, like, there are other islands and places to go with this stuff. You could even set something up somewhere. You could send a carrier, for that matter, and just say, this is only a lab. Nobody else.
Right.
But I would hope that somebody is keeping track of what's going on with the mutations, even if you're not going to do anything about it. I think we owe it to ourselves from a national security perspective to understand where this stuff is, understand what the viral makeup, the genetic makeup is, and then somebody should be, it should be one of the responsibilities of, say, NBAC at the time to develop a countermeasure or something to make sure that if it comes over, if it moves, if something happens, we have a countermeasure. But I don't think you can do that if you decide you're ignoring it entirely. And
to that point, we saw even less of the outside world in this movie than we did in the previous film.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the previous film, we had those soldiers that were shipwrecked and had to come to shore, and so you got a little bit of a taste of the outside world in 2028.
And we know comms work because the one guy had a phone, right?
Exactly.
It was
Yeah.
an iPhone.
and it was about to die or something like that. But
So
in
if
this
he's
film,
worried about his
nothing.
phone dying, it means they have pretty good
Yeah.
infrastructure capabilities. It's not like a radio running on battery.
Now, how does that work? If that, I know
Telecom
we
is
shouldn't be
still-
talking about that previous movie, but if he had an iPhone or he had a phone and he had signal, where's the signal coming from?
I don't think he had a signal.
He might not have had a signal. It could have been just that he had the
Okay.
phone and was
I think
using
he
it
had the
as a
phone. I think he
computer
even
or
mentions.
device.
I think he even mentions in the film that he can't get a signal
Okay.
because
okay.
there's no tele
Okay.
network.
All right. Well, then that makes me feel better because
Yeah.
that is how it should be.
But again,
I don't see that the telecom stays up without electricity for
But
decades.
it does suggest that despite this traumatic event that essentially consumed one of the premier first world nations, the pace of technology and human advancement continued onward at about the same clip as we've seen in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really good point, and I did not even notice that when we watched the last one, because the original film was in 2003, so you have to imagine everything in that time capsule, right? It was 2003.
I'd have to go back.
was
and
early
double check.
2000s,
Yeah,
but-
but basically we're
Before smartphones.
we're looking at
Yeah.
late 2020s, early 2030s in these films.
Yeah.
So just knowing that the pace of tech and advancement appears to have come around or gone at around the same pace, is information. It is useful information to have. But it is telling that this film was even more focused on what is happening, not in the entire island of England, not in certainly not abroad, but specifically within these
Not
few
even the
square walls.
colony.
You don't even
Yeah.
see the colony in this film.
Right.
The film is squarely set on this bipolar structure. You've got Jimmy Crystal over here, you've got Dr. Kelson over here, and Spike kind of operates in and among all that. And I thought that was a very interesting approach here, that they're getting increasingly more focused as they've gone through these two films. And I'm curious to see if that persists into the third film or if it opens up. I did want to quickly mention that the director of this film, DaCosta, in an interview said that the 28 years later, the previous film, was the thematic element was the nature of family. That this film is about the nature of evil, which bears out to a certain extent, both in terms of the behavior of Jimmy Crystal, the motivation of that, as well as Dr. Kelson trying to essentially diagnose the evil of the infected and that the next film would be about the nature of redemption. So I'm very curious to see what that means, whether it's redemption for these characters, redemption for the world, finally deciding to get back involved in what's going on over here, or something else. So I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. But I do appreciate this path they're taking us on, because it's not easily telegraphed. I didn't walk into this film and guess anything that was going to happen, really. I didn't realize how big of a role Samson was going to play. I thought he was a big player in the previous film.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that Spike was going to continue to be, front and center.
Yeah, front and center protagonist. And...
And so that's been kind of interesting to see how that's borne out. Speaking of the previous film, I guess we could talk a little bit more about the psychosis piece. But one thing I did think about as I was preparing for this podcast is that, we talked a lot on our last episode about the woman who gave birth on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the last film. And how in that moment that she gives birth, it's like she comes out of a fog. We didn't talk about it like that, but now in light of seeing this film, it makes a lot more sense that she was reaching out for comfort, perhaps in an animalistic or a human way, reaching for connection and comfort in the moment that she gave birth. And it's really fascinating that almost foreshadowed some of the discussion from this film about what the nature of the aggression, or what is causing the aggression in all these people. And whether
Are you
or not
saying that giving birth
acts
acts as an antipsychotic and morphine?
I think it provides a moment of clarity. But I think
I'm
think
joking,
the
I'm
pain.
joking. But
I think the pain
that
can
threshold.
focus the mind.
I think
in that moment.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what it comes to. It's a intense feeling.
Yeah,
like you were saying. Yeah. So like the pain in that moment, the hormones.
I think it probably overcomes any pain or mania induced by the infection.
Yeah, it almost feels like, or seems like, the infection is a wall or a barrier to certain parts of the brain, rather than being integrated actually within the brain itself.
That's what they seem to imply, and I'm still not entirely sold on the science of it. But but I have to tell you, I walked out of this film and said, "This is ridiculous. There's no way this would actually apply." In the 6 days since I've seen that film, I've looked up a lot of questions. Can psychosis cause amnesia? Can you cure psychosis with one dose of antipsychotic drugs? And all the answers are maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And that really surprised me. I was not expecting that, and for that reason alone, I'm impressed with the approach they took here, because they're not promising all the answers. In this one particular case, something seemed to have worked for in that moment.
Right.
But I was very, very surprised to see that, in fact, research has borne out a lot of the things. And it makes sense to a certain extent. I mean, we saw it, to the example given earlier of COVID. We've seen coronaviruses cause neurological impacts on people long term. We saw it with COVID, and we saw it with SARS. We saw it on a larger scale with COVID. The mental fog, long COVID, a lot of different things. It's not outside the realm of possibility that this could cause amnesia and could cause psychosis, which in turn causes amnesia.
Again, I say, why
are
we not finding out about these things? I mean, just from a scientific perspective, I can't believe, that there's nobody that at China today is running around all over the world collecting, samples and specimens and animals and all kinds of things. Because they, giving them the best motivation. They want to know what's going on. Why are we not? And look, we don't have all of the information. Maybe somebody has gone. Maybe you, Samrid, went over there, or Gorn from WHO picked up a whole bunch of stuff, and they brought it back to a lab, and they have been, doing pathology and all of that, and figuring out what's where. And
that's a question I had, Asha. As I've been thinking about it, does the rest of the world know that this is potentially a cause of the aggression and of the behavior? And if they do know, and we have no way of knowing from the films, they've had 28 years, though, to figure it out if they have specimens from the original outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do know, have they done anything with that information? And the answer might very well be no, because as I was thinking about it, while this was a very neat arc for Kelson and really cool for Samson's character, it is also, from my perspective, a very inefficient way to address a broad-scale infection. An outbreak, right? I mean, you're talking about individual treatments of antipsychotic drugs. They may or may not have permanent effects. They may or may not work on the individual. You're also talking about
it depends on the person.
Depends on the person. It depends on the mutation. I mean, this worked on an alpha, right? And maybe the one dose of the antipsychotic drugs is sufficient to fully cure psychosis in an alpha because they are essentially Ubermensch, right?
Well, yeah,
superhuman. But maybe for the runners, it's not sufficient. Maybe for the pig-like zombies, it's not sufficient. Also, even if you treated it and they got their minds back and they got their memories back, would the pig-like zombies want to keep living?
Yeah, that's true. And also, like, another thing to consider is how does it present neurologically in different. Like, I think that speaks to the point. There are different. There are ones that are alphas. There are ones that, you know.
What if it only genetically affects people?
It could.
In Great Britain.
It could.
That's another question.
We don't know. Like, what is it interacting with?
Did these mutations manifest specifically because of the genetic makeup of the British Isles?
Right. It's very possible.
And do we have any epigenetic drift or whatever going on?
Yeah.
We just, we don't know. But I will say, with Kelson, although it's kind of implied, it is implied strongly in this film that he's come up with the cure, at least for 2 of the 3 symptom buckets that he describes. At the same time, I was impressed with the movie that, he's writing stuff down in a lab notebook, right? Very experimental, very like, okay, if it hadn't worked, I'm sure he would have gone back into his little hidey hole and taken out his notebook and said, okay, did not work with Samson. Alter this. Let's try again with that. So I extend more, I don't know if grace is the right word, but reasonableness. But that you are right, Rob. That's not really how it's pushed or portrayed in the movie. It's more the like, oh, this guy is cured, or they think there's a good chance. I mean, because it kind of it does seem to last for Samson for
which
a
I
while.
thought was odd, but again, it could be something physiologically going on with Samson that just makes him retain the medication. I mean, for a longer period of time, possibly indefinitely.
You don't think? I thought they were implying there was some kind of like chain reaction.
It
like
could
if
be.
you calm this down and you get rid of the pain, and then you do this other thing, that allows some other thing to happen, and that becomes permanent.
I guess my hesitation with that being more plausible is that even with just regular humans, we're terrible with mental health drugs and psychiatry. Like, we're really bad at it. As bad as we are with developing drugs and doing research on physical health, we're 10 times worse at it when it comes to psychological.
What do you mean worse?
We haven't done the research. We kind of just started learning about the brain this century, like for real, rather than just kind of like being able to use functional MRI and stuff. And a lot of these antipsychotic medications, they might have like a 50% efficacy rate. Antidepressants have a 50% efficacy rate, and just today.
Yeah, but look, I mean,
like, so my point is,
Kelson wasn't sure that this was going to work.
He wasn't sure this was going to work.
He got lucky.
There has also been apparently some evidence, although you're right, it is a small percentage. That depending on timing of treatment after psychosis manifests, that one treatment could theoretically be sufficient.
Yeah, that is true.
We're being asked to suspend some disbelief here, but we're also dealing with a virus that has essentially caused an individual to grow in muscle mass in an abnormal way that we wouldn't normally see in nature. So there is already some suspension of disbelief.
Why do you think? You thought he looked abnormal?
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the abnormal part? I missed.
Well, so the actor who portrays the character, he actually is wearing a suit.
Okay, but I guess I didn't notice that there was some altered physiology there.
Well,
he looked like The Rock to me.
It is altered physiology. It's implied, actually, altered physiology, because if you actually see him, how he perceived himself on the train, he's a lot slimmer than how he appears.
Oh, I thought he was younger.
Well, he's a boy, and then there's a brief moment where you almost see him slightly older, and I wondered if that was as an adult in his mind, where he's not ripped. And it's heavily implied when they talk about the alphas in the previous film that the physiological changes they undertake as part of becoming an alpha essentially makes them stronger, faster, and more intelligent than regular zombies.
Yeah, and they did mention that there is a visual component, because Kelson brings up why, like, it doesn't make sense to kill a baby unless you're seeing something
Well, and
whether it's
then,
a hallucination or you're
but
actually.
Samson on the train, there's the memory he has of himself as a boy with his parents or
Yeah.
whoever, and he looks up at the
Yep, and then you
attendant
see
or
the-
something, and he sees
Yeah.
uh
In that briefest of flashes, as
Yeah.
he's seeing them as zombies, basically, or
Right.
as infected, you briefly see him as older than being a boy.
Yeah.
no,
while
no,
wearing
I don't mean
clothes.
that. I mean
You
that
mean-
he
you mean you
looks
see
at
the
her,
attendant.
Yeah.
and she's
Yeah.
turned
Phases.
into this demonic,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
face or
Yeah.
something.
So I think we see that. I don't think he
But
registers
Kelson
that.
suspected it when he was like,
Right.
it doesn't make sense. Why are you
Yeah.
just randomly killing people?
Yeah.
You would if you were so scared of what you were seeing. This is the theory in the movie, right? This is what's causing this.
Right.
So I have another theory I want to float by you guys.
Okay.
So we're asking, is it possible to cure psychosis after a
Yeah.
single dose? Because really, Samson's in trouble if the answer is no, right?
Right.
Because he's going to likely
Also,
revert.
it's not just not like antipsychotics, but the morphine was also part of the treatment.
Morphine was a temporary
Oh, just to
panacea,
get him to
just to get him
chill.
to calm down,
Yeah.
so that he could try to administer. Well, Samson was seeking the morphine as a relief. Kelson, I think, was hoping that the psychotics would help address some more fundamental element of the
Gotcha.
of
the pain
So
No, not the pain.
or the
The
psychological.
morphine was for the pain.
there's
Yeah, for the
well,
psychological.
the psychological
Yeah.
miasma
Yeah.
that was kind of causing him to see or seek to hurt others.
Right.
You know, he's probably still feeling the pain even after he
But
gets
it's interesting
treated.
though, right? Because a gigantic, strong person actually should be able to put up with the pain.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, I hear it from nurses all the time that it's always the big, strong men that
That are the biggest babies.
that are the biggest babies when it comes to getting their blood drawn. Or,
So anyway,
but yeah, it's your theory.
let's say, you know, I mean, I guess there's a possibility, Asha, that you're correct that the antipsychotic drugs didn't solve the issue in and of itself.
And
but
anyway, where was the pain? Sorry, I got to go back to that.
he
He described excruciating pain and disquiet.
he
as the
did.
symptoms.
So
He did.
he described three
Kelson.
different
Kelson.
stools of this infection leg. The physiological changes and damage to the human body that come with infection.
Mm-hmm.
This mental pain and disquiet.
Yeah.
That the
Sensory kind of.
sensory overload to a certain
Mhm.
extent that the morphine was assisting, and then the psychosis. Those were the three pieces that he vocalized to Samson when he was kind of ruminating out loud what to do.
Okay.
By the way, as an aside, I agree with your earlier statement. I think his application of the scientific method reminded me of the Andromeda strain in terms of just like how methodical it seemed, and I appreciated that.
Yeah.
But my theory is, assuming that the antipsychotic drugs might not have by themselves been able to cure Samson, is it possible that by virtue of mutating their hosts or mutating themselves and then in turn physiologically altering their hosts over the course of 28 years, that this virus has unintentionally created a being that can more easily overcome the negative symptoms and impacts of said virus and basically outgrow the virus over a period of time? Not on its own, but with assistance of
I was with you until
intervention.
outgrow. I
Well,
think
not
the answer
outgrow,
to
but-
that is, like I was saying before,
Coevolution.
If you can coevolution or allowing the host to
Yeah.
get to the point where it can survive something
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I don't know of any cases, but JT, maybe you do, of where a host outgrows, gets beyond.
I mean,
I think it's in terms of like, I don't think the virus would. I mean, I think it's possible you could get to a point where your immune system is just capable of clearing certain viruses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the advances in our immune system kind of show that.
So that's the coevolution piece,
That is the coevolution
not
piece.
the virus affecting the body, making the body do something
That is the coevolution piece because they're reacting and adapting to each other.
to each other.
To each other. Yeah, to each other's in the system. So I think it is a good point. And you do see, I mean, think about it this way. There are more bacterial and viral cells in our body than human cells.
and we've learned to live with that.
And we've learned to live with that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of them, like, they don't hurt us, they help us. They do really important physiological functions in the body that, it's a symbiotic relationship that could form over time. And maybe that's what's happening with Samson.
I see. If we didn't know that this was a virus, I would wonder if this was actually a parasite.
Oh,
It's a
really?
parasitic infection. You do develop, lots of people do carry around parasites forever, and there is a symbiotic relationship. There are many parasites that get in there and do wild and crazy things with the brain.
Yeah, there's
in an attempt to get the body to do something to help it survive.
Yeah, Toxoplasmosis gondii is that one, that parasite.
Yeah. Maybe we're talking about a co-infection.
I gotta be honest. I feel like the more that we talk about these movies, the less, the more I wish I didn't know the basis of the threat. You know, that like I wish they hadn't revealed in 28 Days Later that it was Ebola based.
Yeah,
because I feel like that would have just allowed for all sorts of speculation and fun discussion about what it, you know, like this. Like, what if it was a parasite?
Yeah, but we don't even.
Cool.
But look, they're saying it was Ebola based. Maybe it wasn't Ebola based. Maybe that was somebody's guess that it was Ebola based.
But even in this movie, the one time that you see an infection occur, was it kind of
the one guy,
the one guy who kind of falls
also
behind.
turned very quick.
Well, I mean, they always turn very quick.
Yeah.
In this film series, they always
turn
very quick.
Those were Ebola
immediately
symptoms.
Vomits up blood as soon as he turns, right?
And Kelson even says, I think hemorrhaging was one of the main symptoms, which is one of the main symptoms of Ebola.
You know,
so
but his skin didn't melt off his face.
But
it went very fast
with Ebola as.
But it kind of remains one of those unfortunate factoids with this series. I wish that wasn't what it was. I wish it was flu, you know, or something else.
Yeah, something
else
that
at least makes it more believable
you know, with
to
these
me.
movies, everybody's trying to adopt a different virus.
Well, yeah, and back in the early 2000s, Ebola was the hot thing, the hot zone.
But don't you wonder how did Ebola get to Great Britain, and yet it's not a problem in Africa?
Or
in
France.
This movie that we know of.
Well, I mean, the
France.
lab.
Why are we talking about France?
It's right across the channel.
Remember at the end of 28 Weeks Later, the infected.
Yeah, they're running.
No, but I mean, it's because they had the Ebola experiments going on in a lab in Britain. That's why it all started in Britain.
Is that what they said?
That's what they showed at the very beginning of 28 Days Later.
I don't even remember now. Sorry.
I guess I wasn't the only. I guess everybody should have gone back to listen to our previous episodes because I did. Yeah, so just a quick recap for the listener.
Am I remembering? Is this with the monkeys and everything?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So, you know, they experimented on rage, right?
Right.
A rage virus. It ended up being a rage virus, even though they were trying to do the exact opposite. So it was a laboratory in Britain. This was This was an engineered virus, and it got free because a bunch of animal welfare people.
Am I remembering the France thing with a whole bunch of people running towards France?
Yes, at the very end of 28 Weeks Later. You see the Eiffel Tower.
It's 28 Weeks Later.
Yeah, 28 Weeks Later.
Confusing it with Train to Busan.
Yeah.
People are running all over the place. But it's interesting. Okay, so we don't know what happened in France. But what if we assume that they were effectively able to repel them?
I think that it's implied in the text crawl at the beginning of 28 Years Later that the rest of the world got it under control and basically managed to.
Yeah, but how did France do that?
I wish they said they shared it.
The Pasteur Institute by itself,
all by itself.
Well, again, it does make you wonder about genetics. You know, the difference between the French and the British.
Possibly.
I mean, there are genetic differences that we do. I mean, as we get better with sequencing and computation and all of that, it is going to be a lot easier to kind of narrow down certain populations. Like, just as an example, like with the services that you can get to test your DNA and tell you where you're from.
Yeah.
On the actual academic side of that, they've been able to kind of use those similar methods to show, okay, this disease is most prevalent in Europeans because of an adaptation they had that resulted from surviving the Black Plague. I think I brought it up before. But so it could, but it is particular to that region. And those people, like for Crohn's disease, like the best Crohn's disease doctors are in the UK.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you mentioned,
Great Britain.
But you mentioned the Pasteur Institute. It is an interesting point. That is a high-level institute that's been around for a very long time.
Yep.
And when I'm asking this question about who cares and who's paying attention, they probably are. They're too close to ground zero for this to not be paying attention.
Right.
And they conveniently had all of those clinical specimens running right at them.
Yeah, running right at
them. They just, they were probably ready for them, captured them or mowed them down with tanks. And the French do have nuclear weapons. There's, if they could. They did have to cross the channel
Yeah.
They didn't
Somehow.
walk into France. They
They did.
ran into France.
Well, they ran through the tunnel.
So there's some time. Well,
Yeah.
but they would
But a
have seen
tunnel
them,
is
right?
still,
They would have seen them in the tunnel.
I mean, that's a very easy choke point.
Yeah, but they
Although-
were outside. They could see the Eiffel Tower.
If they could see the Eiffel Tower,
Oh,
they've made it
they
further
made it
inland,
far enough
so,
inland, yeah.
So it probably took a
But
lot of
there's a
effort
little.
to beat
My
them
point
back.
is, there's a little bit of time as opposed to the 32 seconds that the people
Yeah.
in this movie seem to have before
Yeah,
something
before
happens.
they-
It's just interesting to consider this scenario.
Are there any other thoughts that you guys had before we move to ratings?
I do.
Okay.
There's one big question.
Go for it.
One
What's the
big
big
question I've
question?
been pondering, and I think I might have alluded to this to you previously, Asha. That scene in the train.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do we think that it was a change in pheromones that accompanied his regaining of his memories that caused all the infected to start attacking him like he wasn't infected?
That was actually something that is a great question,
Why
because I was
pheromones?
asking as well.
Because I don't know how else
chemical
what else would
signatures
have
could they-
triggered
yeah.
the infected to immediately view him as
A
a
threat.
target.
Or a target. So it might be something like
I mean, is it him? That
I mean,
He's
there could be
somehow
a-
different.
he
right?
was suddenly different to them, even
But
though
you're
he
saying that would have to be conveyed because he couldn't
it
tell
has to
them.
be smell.
They wouldn't have seen it, so
Right.
it has to be
it
something.
has to be something more
autonomic,
primal,
right?
unless
Automatic.
unless hearing English because he said a word. I don't have a
What
ticket.
did he say?
He said, "I don't have a ticket."
Yeah.
And unless hearing that triggered them to assume that he wasn't infected, but he is still infected.
Yeah.
If anyone were to accidentally get some of his blood in their mouth, they probably would become infected. So it is. So I've been trying to wrestle with what was it about that moment that turned what was previously possibly
Do
his
they
own
attack
pack.
each other?
No,
They usually don't.
not in 28 years later.
Uh-huh.
In 28 days later, sometimes they would. I think maybe.
I don't think so.
As
I
they're
think that was
turning.
only to
Yeah.
infect, like as
possibly.
the expression of the disease as they're
But-
getting it.
But in
But
28
you never
years
really
later,
see them. I don't think.
yeah, 28 years later, they are not attacking each other.
Yeah.
So I think
And in fact, the alphas are exerting some level of control over
the
runners. And so that could have been his own pack attacking him in that moment. And
Which
the
is even
question
weirder.
is, so there's,
Yeah.
we go back to the question I think that we kind of posed or contemplated on our last episode, which is how are the alphas exerting control over the infected? And how did that get inverted as soon as he regained his memories and the psychosis lifted?
yeah, I think
Because it's
pheromones
not
are
biological. It's not, he is still biologically the same.
right, but he could be giving off. But I think pheromones are a good
Yeah.
example because depending on the state of your brain, you're giving off different hormones, which will produce different pheromones. So the fact that his brain changed back to kind of being more human-like may have signified that he's giving off less smells of infected.
Well, he did get a bath. Didn't Kelson clean him up?
Did he?
I don't know. I do remember one scene where it seemed like he was profusely sweating.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that down,
Okay.
but I don't know why that was shown. But it would make sense for the pheromone because when you sweat, you release pheromones. So that
Or
would,
he may have sweat something out.
yeah, and
Maybe.
maybe it was,
Or maybe it's not pheromonic.
it has to be some kind of.
Maybe it was just that he stopped exerting control over them. Maybe it was
But-
psychic.
But even so,
hive mind
kind
of thing?
the runners haven't been attacking each other, and he still has infection in his body. So there's now
That's what I'm saying, though. So that if he's not controlling them anymore, and he's just sort of taking his foot off the gas, they might notice, they might sense that, and now think, okay, this is no longer an alpha. We can attack him.
But if the other runners aren't exerting control on each other, they're not registering those runners as a target. Does that make sense? That you've got two normal zombies aren't
Mhm.
attacking each other anyway.
I know, but he's no longer. So what I'm agreeing with you. I just don't know that the way of conveying this difference is necessarily through pheromones.
Yeah.
But he is somehow different, and they know it.
And they picked up on it
Mhm.
pretty quickly. And in fact, what's odd is they followed him into the train. So it's almost like they thought it's like they picked up that something was going on.
Mhm.
Yeah,
A whole pack of them followed in, and they didn't attack until he spoke words. It was until that moment when they lunged at him.
So do we think that that's what constitutes humanity? Language.
have we seen them
Very
attack people
possibly.
who don't speak and are trying to hide?
Probably.
I feel like we do. So I feel like it can't just be him speaking.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but it's clearly everything turns on that moment.
It does,
whether it's he gets his mind back or he speaks
And
words.
what does he say again?
I don't have a ticket.
I don't have a ticket. Because he's repeating. He's
what he said
reliving a
before.
memory.
Yeah, I don't have a ticket, and then they immediately attack him. So there's something that turns in that moment.
Well, look, he's accessing a language center too. There's all kinds of stuff going on with the brain here.
But I don't think this is gonna be the last time we see reference to this phenomena. I think we're gonna see something else about this in the next film. I feel like this was not a throwaway scene. That this has meaning, and I'm curious to see what it means for.
I think there's
entry in the 20
meaning
series.
all over this. Like I think I'm very curious to see what of all of these different. There were so many things that were attempted in this movie. In terms of treatment, in terms of managing other groups. I appreciated the use of Iron Maiden in the one scene. I thought that was awesome.
I think we both agree that's probably why Ray Fiennes decided to do this movie.
Probably, or he maybe they asked him to come up with some music and he found that.
Yeah.
And again, music hits a different part of the brain, and how we react to it, is different as well. It will be interesting to see what winds up happening. If we don't need morphine, well, actually, let's say we do need morphine. We need something to get rid of pain. Can you blanket an entire island with pain relieving gas or pain relieving something? Put something in the water. Right. Can we do that? And then can we follow that up with whatever the psychotropic, what's a drug was in the end, right? Can we do that? Can we on a large scale get to the point that Kelson did with the individual? I don't know that that's where they're going to go with this movie, but I was wondering, from a public health perspective, if you could, and anyway, who has this information now? Nobody has it except for maybe Spike and the girl, maybe.
I don't think Spike doesn't have the info right now.
Right. So does anybody know this?
So that info is now
gone.
Gone,
so if Spike runs into Samson in the next movie.
Samson has the information.
Samson could tell him.
Samson might have the information. He knows clearly that Kelson helped him. He might not know exactly how he helped him. But if Spike runs into Samson in the next film, he will know that Kelson did something because he knew that Kelson knew Samson. He knew what Samson was like before the treatment because he ran into him last movie.
Yeah.
So he will be able to connect the dots if they cross paths.
And maybe they go back to the house and find the lab notes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They might
go back
go
to the
back,
ossuary.
or even Samson might go back and collect whatever it is, not even knowing what he's collecting, but wanting to preserve something. We haven't gotten to the part where, can he read again? Like it's all very interesting.
Yeah. I think his language seemed to develop pretty quick once he had that memory.
Yeah.
That's when it
seemed
like
to thank Kelson by name.
Yeah, that was a cool moment.
But I would say some of that is indicative, or not indicative, is reflective of what happens with some people who lose the ability to speak after an accident.
Yeah.
It does come. I have seen or heard about it coming back this way. Recognizing one thing, and then that cascading in the brain.
Right.
And then they're able to say more and comprehend more. So the amnesia part of this, if there was one, is an interesting aspect as well. I wonder, for the writers, did they come up with like a whole list of symptoms and characteristics of the brain and what happens and how it happened, and are they drawing from that with each one of these movies, since they're coming at each one from a different angle and are trying to address a different thing?
I think so, because there was one shot in particular that struck me. It was when he went to go eat the blackberry, and he ate the blackberry, kind of looking at it curiously, so he's thinking about it. He eats it, then he wipes on his clothes, showing that he's cleaning himself. That's like a very human thing to do. And then you get to see that he has clothes on when he was completely naked for the rest of the film. So it's showing you slowly how he's becoming more and more human.
Like Adam imagery?
A little bit.
A lot of religious
his nakedness.
themes.
Yeah.
As soon as he becomes self-aware.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think there's absolutely an element to it. I really, we'll talk about this when we go to the ratings, but there was thought given to how they address this question of treating the infected. Again, everything I looked up, I was like, surely it'll say that's not possible. It's plausible.
Yeah.
It's possible. So I don't know who helped provide some, technical assistance on the back end when they were developing this story. But kudos to them, because the fact that there is some suspension of disbelief, but it's not having to, jump over hurdles.
It's not crazy. Like if I had described the movie, like just out of context, there's a zombie that's dancing with a doctor covered in red paint. You probably would be like, okay, that's a lot for me to suspend my disbelief. But going into this film, like they do a really good job of providing enough information to make it plausible and believable.
Well, especially if you've watched all the other movies.
Exactly.
They built one on top of the other. I do wonder, as I was watching this movie, actually all of the movies, I've been trying to think of how do our recommendations from the commission apply to this situation? Now, granted, the infected cannot, they can't do anything. They're too crazed to help themselves.
Yeah.
I guess we're depending on, because so many of our recommendations are governmental. I frankly, even if we had a whole bunch of private sector recommendations, it wouldn't matter in this situation.
There's no infrastructure.
So
no
we're really
economy.
talking about how would our recommendations apply to governments and the private sector outside of Great Britain in this global context.
Or to the rudimentary settlements that might exist within Britain. So, for instance, when we talked about 28 years later, we talked about their stockpile.
The colony.
And making sure that they had proper security and replenishment of the stockpile within their means. So taking basic precautions that you, to the extent that you can take them in a burgeoning society in a post-apocalyptic land, basically acting in lieu of government. But we don't even see that in this.
In this one, no.
And even with the societal implications, we don't actually see governance, other than if you want to call
Jimmy's cult governance.
Jimmy's cult, or even Samson sort of exerting some kind of control over his group. I don't know that I'd call that governance.
If anything, what we see is really just kind of like small separated houses. It's not even like communities, but just houses. You see the one house that Jimmy and his gang brutalized, and then you see Cillian Murphy and his daughter figure at the end living a very quaint country cottage sort of lifestyle, but no community to be found anywhere. So even less ability for government policy to have any meaning in this on the island in particular.
I will say, with regard to stockpiling, one thing, if Kelson's notes and perhaps other researchers and doctors who are within this geographic area and are trying to do something and have written something down, and all that has gone somewhere to somebody, it certainly does make me feel like there's justification for onshoring of stuff, right? If Great Britain discovers that we need a whole bunch of morphine, and what was the second thing that he gave him? What was the other?
I think naloxone was one, maybe, potentially.
Okay.
It was a cocktail of a number of different things, I think he said, but he said the biggest component was the morphine.
Okay. Well, morphine and, let's say, Xanax, right? I don't know, something. And they can't make either one of those there. I mean, now we're depending on the kindness of other countries to, as you said, to airdrop something in there.
And it seems like they don't want to help.
But regardless, even if they wanted to help, they might say, well, we need to keep all this for ourselves. But how is Great Britain going to pay for it? Mm-hmm. This is an enormous humanitarian,
that could be why the world hasn't responded. It's just not worth the cost.
They don't know yet.
It's not worth the economic
nobody
cost.
knows about this miraculous cocktail just yet.
Well, they don't know about that, but they might. The investment of even figuring that out.
All I'm saying is it does point to a reason to onshore some stuff, to be able to, people might be willing to say, okay, we'll give you this, we'll donate the ingredients, you guys make it over there, at least we can save on that cost, and I don't know, how much morphine would you need? Like, we don't get into all of that, we only see this compressed time frame,
right?
But it does speak to the need to onshore some manufacturing capability. It would be helpful. I know we don't want to have a strategic national stockpile here in the United States in this administration right now, but if we had this stuff there, at least they could get a head start while the rest of the world or the rest of the country is ramping up its manufacturing capability.
So that way, if it comes to us, we don't have to wait 2 to 3 months to get masks because China is using them all because they're all made there.
By the way, from a government policy perspective, you're talking about external governments. All the intelligence agencies have failed entirely here.
100%.
Think about it. Unless they're using their satellites to figure out what's going on. You're telling me that the agency wouldn't have tried to identify a potential asset within Great Britain to learn about all the different mutations and how to feed that information back through national security,
How would they?
channels?
You're suggesting they would have done what?
They would have tried to identify and talk to people who were still living on the island.
Well, here's a real world example, though. We did not do that in China.
Well, exactly.
So
it was a failure of human. It would have to be
can we
a
expect
special operation.
the other countries to do something like that if it didn't even happen in real life?
Well, you're right, or we haven't seen it. We don't know, or it might have been considered too great a risk.
I mean, maybe if the next movie is about the nature of redemption, maybe we find out
Yeah,
that this
maybe we
whole
find
time
that out.
the rest of the world has in fact been biding its time trying to figure out how it could reestablish human dominance on this island, and maybe they have intelligence assets we haven't seen to figure out about all these different mutations of carriers. And the implications.
I don't know. I mean, it might be a resource thing too. It could be that these governments are trying to put all their money into a different type of prevention. It's really difficult to say. And if you have a country with a leader that's decided, well, we're just like we too bad. Sorry about our long history with you, Great Britain, but goodbye.
Yeah.
They could just be preventing any kind of contact. But we're back to this communications question. Now, I do think if everything has continued the way we have seen it continue in our own society right now, and I do agree, somebody's looking at SIGINT and satellite imagery and watching, but I don't know how much you can really derive other than population movements. The infected are not doing something that could be seen other than gathering. They're not going to be able to tell from a satellite image unless they're really honing in like they did for like the Osama bin Laden raid, and how much, it's just wildly expensive. I doubt very much that anybody has seen on satellite imagery Jimmy's people skinning everybody, especially since they were inside, right? Most of the time, I think they were inside. So I don't know, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
For the intelligence community. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. Now, I would say I wouldn't be surprised if the intelligence community went and grabbed somebody or something and put them into a laboratory somewhere that none of us know anything about, and that they have been doing something. But I think if we had somebody from the agency, from the CIA sitting here, I think they would say, they would probably have the answer, but they would be asking, like, what is the role?
Yeah.
Like, how much intelligence do we need? All those people are infected.
Yeah. What's the functional?
What are you asking? And why is it our job versus DOD's job versus, well, what's left of CDC's job or WHO's job if we were part of WHO anymore?
For instance, any samples they might have gotten from the initial infection would be very different from the mutated strains that exist in Britain 28 years later.
So we saw with COVID just a few months later.
Exactly. Plus, you need intelligence to realize that you're actually talking about 3 different strains of the virus.
Yeah, but is that an intelligence thing or is it a public health thing?
I think it's an intelligence thing because you don't know that that's the case until
but why is the intelligence community going after that information as opposed to the healthcare and public health community? Why did they have to be the ones to do it?
Because I don't think the healthcare and public health community is equipped to send people over there to either identify.
Yeah, but why is the CIA equipped?
Because they're equipped to sending people into hostile territory.
I don't think in this scenario, I don't think anybody is equipped to go into this territory.
Well, then we're talking about the military. Yeah. We're talking about military intelligence.
We saw what happened with the military in the last movie, right?
That was not a specific. That was not an asset that was trained for that mission. Let's put it that way.
So I think really what you're saying is if it's not the intelligence community and the defense community or any of the communities, what you would need in this scenario is you would need to train up units, plural, of people who are capable of going into a a hostile territory in terms of things attacking you and a virus floating around with unknown etiology and unknown, we don't know, is it airborne, is it not airborne, like we don't know what's going on with it. And be able to, like, I don't even know how you would run a person through the psychological tests. You might need, like, it could be that some of these people are falling prey to this virus because of psychological makeup that they have. We don't know. And so maybe some people are actually stronger and just psychologically capable of dealing with something that other people are not. So what are we doing about that? What's the polygraph like for these people? Like, it's interesting. But I will say, I'm not trying to push back too much, Rob. You know, this is the definition of a closed country.
Yeah.
And you're right. During COVID, what did we see? We at least, you know, outwardly, we saw and we heard the intelligence community saying, this is not, we don't do this. We don't have the resources to do this, etc. And finally, everybody had to say, this is a closed country. We have to find out about what is going on. It doesn't matter whether it's a weapons complex or a lab accident or whatever.
Right.
We have to get in there and find out. Who gets in there and finds out? You're right. It's either the intelligence community, or it is the special operations community, or I suppose you can hire the mercenary people, but technically they work for both.
Yeah.
Right.
And you need to figure it out, because the rest of the world is going to want to know if that ever breaks out, if it becomes airborne,
Right.
if it can float over the ocean. We need to be able to develop a countermeasure now,
Right.
before it gets
So
here.
it can't just be the intelligence community. It has to be them coming back,
Yeah.
and giving information to everybody else, or you need a team composed of, you know, now it sounds like the A team or something, right? But you need the intel person, the defense person, the health person, the ag person, the lab person. It sounds like a special forces team, to be honest.
Sounds like the A team.
You're going to need like a subject matter expert that's also a special forces operator. Like you're going to need people with that.
Okay.
Those
Can we
wide
work this
disciplines.
recommendation into one of our reports in the future?
Appropriate firearms training into the Epidemic Intelligence Service.
I mean, we'd have to call that report the A team report, right?
Yeah.
Like that would just
Or
be
the B team.
or the B
The B team.
the bio team.
The bio team.
B for bio. I like it.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Let's get to the. Do you have one
Oh,
other thing,
Rob,
Rob?
do
I
you
have
have more?
one more, not necessarily bio-related point, but one just one compliment for the movie before we move to the ratings.
Just one?
One more, just
Okay.
one more, because I've had a few so far. We talked, we talked about 28 years later. We were talking a little bit about the preferred method of engagement with the infected that was shown by those who were in the colony. Like, they preferred bows, long-range weapons, because they didn't want to have to get up close, because they didn't want to risk infection. Again, props to to Garland and to the folks who made this movie, showing that Jimmy's people fight smart. Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about. I don't think it's
a really
a coincidence
good point.
that we didn't talk about Jimmy Crystal or his fingers that much in this episode, because they aren't really related to Bio, except in this one regard. The way that they fight, the way they engage with infected, they are purposefully avoiding being caught in any sort of fluid spray or other sort of potential contamination elements. It's their motions in and of themselves are
Very
almost
methodical.
fluid.
Yeah, it's very methodical
fluid.
to prevent themselves from getting.
Yes.
Even though they're doing close quarters engagement, they're
Exactly.
making an concerted effort to avoid splash or spread. Or
There's one moment where one of the fingers
Yeah.
who's been sent off to scout, and she's the one that sees Kelson with Samson. She actually does a forward roll after she cuts an infected's throat so that she avoids the artillery, the spray. Again, a very one of those small things that I really appreciated, because if you are living in that sort of environment, to protect yourself from infection, you are going to have to get used to having to get up close with these these infected individuals and find ways to avoid infection, both directly through them biting you, but also from potential fluid contamination.
Interesting, though, that nobody's wearing anything remotely resembling PPE.
Yet again, yeah.
Jimmy's cult was wearing masks.
Yeah, but then they
do,
took
but
them
that's
off.
that's more ceremonial.
I know
in
it's
my,
not. It is not PPE
from my perspective.
But I thought it was funny.
It's a very good point.
Well, why were they all wearing wigs? Did we understand that?
Well, so Jimmy Crystal, you might recall, he was the young boy who was in the cold open of the previous film. So when he was growing up, Jimmy Savile was still around, and
Mhm.
and his I don't know how familiar you are with Jimmy Savile. He was a very well-known British children's entertainer, almost like the Mr. Rogers of Britain.
Mhm.
After he died, later in the aughts, they found out that he was also an abuser, unfortunately.
Oh.
But since 28 Days Later happens in the early aughts, he's still alive, and it's before all that happens. So Jimmy, as a child, his two most clear, I guess, memories of that time period are watching Teletubbies, and obviously he would have watched
Oh,
Jimmy
yeah,
Savile.
yeah.
So he, obviously is mentally ill and is coping. He's dealing with trauma. You want to talk about dealing with trauma in a post bio event environment. He is the poster child of that. So he's grasping on to the nostalgia of better times from his youth. And you actually kind of hear it a little bit when he talks to Kelson,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He has almost a certain level of reverence to the extent that he can have for anybody. So, because this is an older person who was around in those before times, and who speaks in a very calming manner. And I think he's yearning for that. He can't find it. So he has, made up for that by engaging in all this fantastical thinking that he's Sir Jimmy Crystal, and he's the son of Satan, and he's got his fingers and his rituals and all that. But he's clinging to the cultural icons of his youth.
Okay.
And probably the last times he remembers being happy.
Well,
I would
exactly.
say it probably is also why he clings to it.
I do have a question before we move on to the ratings. When they crucify, I guess he's crucified, well, at least hanging upside down.
He's crucified.
Jimmy, you see the briefest of brief flashes of some infected, it looked to me, person coming up on him. Was that Samson, or was it just some other?
It was probably not Samson, because Samson walked away with Kelson, and I think just based on the rough outline of that person, they weren't big enough.
Somebody in the AO?
My first thought was it's an infected getting him. When I looked up some kind of explainer or summaries of the movie afterwards, it suggested an unknown figure approached him. So it could have been infected. He might be dead, or he could show up again in the next movie, for all we know. I don't know what your thought was when you saw that.
We saw in the last film that didn't make sense until you saw this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it could be one of those things.
What other things didn't make sense till we saw this movie?
I'm trying to remember what else it was. I think can't remember exactly what it was. There were other things that I remember though that, or things that had foreshadowed it that you had just mentioned previously. But things like that.
I think there were things that were foreshadowed.
Like each shot in these movies matters.
Well, even in the previous movie, there was too much camera time given to Samson as the alpha. If you just left
for
it,
his role in the
film,
film,
you'd be like, why are we spending almost this time? But then it makes sense when you get to the next movie. Oh,
just
it's because
and in the same vein, him being cured of his psychosis has to matter for the next film, because otherwise, why would you go through that effort?
And Kelson, I mean, of course, this is different, but like, I can't imagine that Ralph Fiennes is taking that role for that one movie and not having something more meaty to do in the next one. So it's not exactly the same thing, but
I mean also like Jimmy's cult kind of.
I don't know.
I mean, we saw him
at the end of the last one. You don't think he's that culty.
No, you don't. You actually
in a negative
but
way.
You don't know really what's going on. It's kind of a jarring ending.
Yeah.
But it becomes very like it after you watch that first film. You kind of think back and you're like, oh yeah, I remember the first scene with the Teletubbies, and it's like, oh, that's probably who that was.
Well, in fact, I think they show it. He's wearing an inverted cross.
Yeah.
Which I think is what he's also wearing in the first scene of the movie.
Yeah.
So they make the connection. But, I mean, he's surrounded by a bunch of people wearing Jimmy Savile wigs. I kind of figured he was a little loony.
It's really interesting to see. Now, you said that the next movie is about redemption, right? That's the next theme?
That's going to be the theme, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, fooling around with all this imagery. If Kelson is the father, is Cillian Murphy's character the son? Who's gonna get sacrificed? Was Kelson sacrificed? Did Jesus sacrifice? Is there another sacrifice? Does it need to be Spike because he's the son too? Who's gonna come up against if Jimmy comes back? Is he the Antichrist? In which case we need a Christ figure. Like, And then, but remember, I thought, in terms of significant things we need to pay attention to in this movie, Killian's daughter says, are we going to go help them?
Yeah.
And there's a pause or something, and he says, well, of course we're going to go help them.
Exactly.
That's a very Jesus-y thing to say, in my opinion.
I don't even think it's just a Jesus-y thing to say, but I didn't even pick up on that. What I thought when you just said that was it could explain why there aren't communities. People aren't helping each other. It could explain what, like, the international community isn't helping. Like, it could be just kind of more of a foreshadowing, like, it's just not the thing that people do in this world now.
Well, they're trying to survive.
It's a lack of trust.
I mean, think about it. If you invite someone like Jimmy and his crew into your house, you could end up dead.
Yeah.
Right. It's probably just easier.
Yeah.
To
just say no.
We're just here.
Forge for yourselves.
Keep moving. Whatever. I think it's just going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. And is this next movie supposed to be the last movie?
I don't know if they've said definitively it's going to be the last movie ever. I think it's just going to be the last of this trilogy. They haven't announced any others after this next one.
Okay.
Let's hope it does better at the box office.
Through no fault of its own.
But this one is getting high ratings.
It has high ratings, but
it's just not around very much.
It didn't do well at the box office, so production companies will look at it.
In fairness, they didn't even release it to lots of box offices.
They didn't, and they did it in January.
It's hard to have great numbers if you're putting it in 5 theaters.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the Biollywood podcast will probably be giving it a nice rating.
We will give it a boost.
We'll boost viewership through our likely positive ratings. So I think that's a good segue to go into the ratings.
Let's do it.
Okay. Relevance to commission recommendations is the first category.
And the government is a separate category, right?
Yep.
Government policy is a separate category.
I mean, I think this is very relevant to the extent that none of our recommendations were followed, and so this happened.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let me push back on that slightly.
Yeah.
I guess we have a time frame issue, but let us recall that the United Kingdom, did in fact pick up our recommendation to put the National Security Advisor in charge of biodefense, number one. Number two, they picked up on our recommendation for a national biodefense strategy. They have one. That they produced after hours, but they do have one. So one assumes that maybe the United Kingdom did actually have some of our recommendations implemented, but I doubt that they did them all.
I think this is a great point. I think the fact that the United Kingdom fell in 2003, long before it had the opportunity to put any of these provisions into place, is a good sliding doors, alternate universe look of what happens when you don't have these measures in place.
Maybe we could say, if it was, if all of this were to happen after or now, maybe
the response might be better.
Somewhat different. Yeah, but this is the cautionary tale of what happens when you don't put in any of these, implement any of our or similar recommendations.
Yeah. but it is difficult to rate it because, to the point that you made earlier, there's just not much there 28 years later to be for which our recommendations would be applicable at this stage.
Well, how about this though? For the rest of the world.
Yeah, for the rest of the world.
You're right.
They are dropping
all
the ball.
of our biosurveillance recommendations apply into the intelligence. We at least need a biointelligence national intelligence manager to at least have some understanding of what's going on. We'd still need a national, more than ever, we would need national biodefense strategies for every country, including our country. It is important enough to have it go all the way up to the vice president to be in charge, if not the president themselves, for real.
Definitely need to innovate on biodefense R&D to be prepared with countermeasures and diagnostics for these in case they ever get off the island.
We need S&T, so all of our Apollo program stuff should be in full force.
The
international stuff.
Surveillance and aid.
Yes. We recommended a global response force, basically, that the United States would lead. Some stuff isn't going to apply, like, Biological Weapons Convention verification and compliance. Not with this, if we assume that this is naturally occurring. But, anything we say about manufacturing, I think all of that, we don't really get to onshoring. I don't think we've talked about that yet. But so I think for the rest of the world,
Yeah, we talked about ADMs, which is somewhat
Yeah,
something like
ADMs
that.
kind of.
with Apollo. Yeah.
so I think that, but that's not what the movie's about, and it's
No.
not about everybody
Yeah.
else. But in that case, we would say that the recommendations would apply,
So could we split this and say on the island they don't apply, off the island they very much do?
or they would
Sure.
have applied beforehand, is what you said,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think so.
Want to give it a 3? Is that too high?
No,
I
I
was
think
thinking
I think that's proper.
3.
Between a 5 and a
Were
1?
you gonna go
I was gonna
higher?
go higher. I was gonna go 4.
4.
Well, I guess if you're looking purely off the island.
Yeah, but we can go with 3, or we can do 3.5.
What do you think, Rob?
The risk of invoking another 3.7 rating.
3.7.
Well, I will say we could do 3.5 for this.
Okay, 3.5.
Split the difference.
All right. Next category is scientific accuracy. I feel like, similar to the Andromeda strain, like obviously there were things in this that were not scientifically accurate, but the plausibility, the way that, Kelson kind of figures these things out, I think is pretty accurate for how somebody, at least in that kind of an environment, would be doing it.
Yeah.
You would be looking at whatever textbooks you had to try and figure something out, even if it was an herbal medicine textbook
Right.
or
Whatever he was able to collect
Right.
in his travels.
in his travels. So I think it kind of reminds me not just of the Andromeda strain, but also of the Martian. Like you're in a constrained, limited,
Doing the
resource
best you
limited
can.
environment, doing the best you can.
Good application of science, the
yeah.
scientific
Yeah.
method.
So I think for that point alone, like I would say at least
What's
a 4.
the category again?
Scientific accuracy.
Well, also we in this category we discuss whether is this the actor portrayal?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Or no.
no,
Yeah.
is that later?
That's a different
That's a
category.
different one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think from I mean it's a made up thing, so we can't say they didn't say it is absolutely positively the exact same Ebola virus that we have right now. So, and we don't see anything under a microscope.
Right.
We don't see, prospective studies over the last 28 years. We don't see any of that. I think it was pretty accurate. I didn't look at anything and go, like sometimes we have the bacteria that's also referred to as a virus,
Right,
that kind
or
of thing. We
something
didn't
like
have
that.
any of
So
that
just
happening.
blatantly incorrect things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you looked up the psych literature.
And it's
on stuff.
and it's not impossible.
No, I think it's more possible than you would think probably for some of these outcomes to happen in a similar situation.
I really, honestly expected to come in here today and give this a low score. But after looking up some of the stuff that's out there,
Yeah.
I'm still not entirely sold on a virus can turn you into, it can
definitely,
roid
yeah.
you up,
Not
which is what we
saying-
talked about in the last episode.
Right.
So I'm a little unsure about that. But in the context of this movie specifically,
Mm-hmm.
I would give it a high score.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't answer all the questions to your point.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show all the work to say this is fully accurate, but it also doesn't break reality or break the immersion.
It's not it's not saying hey, like assuming things.
Exactly.
It's comfortable like not giving you an answer and saying we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
and it lives in reality to a certain in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Because
that is accurate. We don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Science,
Yeah.
as much as there are certainties in science, we all know there's also very much uncertainty in other other areas, and things that we thought were once certain that become uncertain as time as more information comes in.
The way Kelson is, he's all over the place. He's gathering medicines and things. It's hard for me to believe he couldn't put his hands on a microscope at some point. He's got speakers,
Yeah.
a record player,
Yeah, good point.
vinyl records, morphine, syringes.
Well, that's a good point. Where did he get the morphine from, and
know,
what was the likelihood there was a
one
microscope?
imagines
There's a
he went
microscope
into
there
a
too.
hospital at some point, which
Yeah.
would have a laboratory.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
that might have been giving
But
too
maybe
much
he
away.
raided a pharmacy. I don't know if they it's
Yeah.
tough to tell.
So he went to a pharmacy, but not to a. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
so what are we giving it?
I would say a 4 or a 4.5.
I would say 4.
4.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
4 it is. The next category is scenario development, which is success of the imagination or creativity. I do feel like this was very different. Again,
Yeah.
similar to the last 28 years film, very different than other zombie
Mhm.
movies or
And different from the other ones in this series.
in this series. Yeah, they take very different angles on this stuff, and I think it's it's important to show how, biological events are not just, scary like horror things, but it can have all these downstream effects as well on the way people think and the way they act in their communities and, how they evolve and change over time.
Well,
So,
and also, the focus on the psychosis, and the potential onset of psychosis by infectious disease, you just don't. I'm not seeing that in pop culture a whole lot, and so I do appreciate that.
But we do see it with some diseases.
It is possible.
Like rabies is all about that, right?
Well, sure, but we attribute that specifically to rabies. And I don't think we talk enough in the cultural arena about the fact that there are other diseases out there that can cause long-term psychosis.
Yeah, like the Nipah virus, the outbreak in India right now. I think I could be wrong. It's either 1 in 5 or 1 in 3 cases, long-term neurological damage, actually like preventing you from doing certain things, or so. It's not uncommon. I think it's just understudied and underappreciated.
What causes the paralysis with polio? Is that neurological or is it physiological? Or neurophysiological?
Probably neurophysiological. I think it has to do with the nervous system. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I would have to check.
But I do think, so the point that you made about how they approached it differently even in this film compared to the previous films, 28 years later was focused on the physical changes in the hosts.
Yeah.
This movie was very much internalized. Yeah. It was on the psyche, on the psychological well-being or lack thereof of Samson as a test subject. And again, that is a really cool way to approach an infected subject.
Yeah,
that we don't see, I think, as much as we should. It exhibits some outside the box thinking with regard to how they wanted to approach this film. Is very internalized. So
okay,
I agree. 5.
I don't have a problem with 5. I think it was pretty creative.
I'm fine with that.
All right, and then the next category, entertainment value, 5.
No discussion. Just 5. Move on. I mean, obviously very entertaining.
Yeah.
For me, it was a more difficult watch than 28 years later was, but that's not because of the acting or the quality of the story. It's purely because the human on human violence is just more difficult for me to watch than zombie on human violence for whatever reason.
And some of the pacing in this, I think they were trying to contrast the frenetic activity going on at one place and at one time, and then slow and calm with Kelson and just sort of, trying to get over to the other side. And for me, that was the more difficult thing. I was like, oh my gosh.
You're right. It was a slower film.
TikTok.
Yeah, it definitely was slower.
I didn't really view the last film as involving a whole lot of violence because none of the main characters, none of the main characters were infected.
Yeah.
There was the one main character who died. But compared to that film, there was not almost no violence, but a lot less violence in this film.
Yeah.
And the violence we did see in this one was more
tougher to watch.
Horrifying.
Tougher to watch.
Yeah. Of course, it hits closer to home too, especially with someone.
Well, it's also like humans doing it to other
people
humans.
Completely out of control. That's one thing, right? They're infected. They're sick.
Yeah.
What's going on with Jimmy?
Yeah. Why is he skinning?
We know he's got the psychological problems, but it just feels worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, entertainment, you're giving it a 5, Rob?
We can.
I probably would make it a 4 or 5 only because the scene in the barn was really was tougher, a tougher watch. Would not have preferred.
I'm still not buying that there's some satanic need to skin people.
It's not satanic. He's mentally ill.
I know, but even so, it just didn't feel like this is a necessary. There are all kinds of ways to torture people. Why is that the choice every single time?
Yeah,
I would have bought it better if, like, okay, this time we've decided to do this, and this other time we've decided to do this other thing.
Yeah.
More creative with your torture.
Sorry?
So they should be more creative with their torture.
Creative.
Come on.
Well, they're children, and he's mentally a child, so that might have something to play with it.
I would give it a 4.
Okay, so we will settle in the middle at 4 or 5?
Yeah.
Okay. 4 or 5 it is. Next category is the government policy category. So
that we see
or can be inferred.
Yeah. So let me read it because I don't think I had it properly in the mic the first time.
Yeah, well, there is no government. There is no government. So how can we? What did we say last time? How did we
I think
rate
it was
this?
0 or 1 at best.
Yeah,
I think it was 1 because there was some policy at the community level.
there was policy at the community level, and we saw NATO.
Yes.
Right. show
Yeah,
up.
so that's what
This
gave
time,
us.
I almost wonder
And
if
we
we have
didn't
to,
like what NATO was doing. They're just sort of floating around.
I almost wonder if we have to say NA here because we just don't see what policy might exist off the island or even at the small community level because it was just so personal.
No NA. We have to give it a rating.
Okay. Well, I mean, NA equals 0.
But there is no. Yeah, but there is no policy.
Yeah.
That we could tell.
Yeah.
And even Kelson on his own changed his own policy.
Yeah.
He should have killed Samson.
Yeah.
He didn't.
Jimmy's policies are all over the place.
Jimmy doesn't have policy. He just has moods.
Yeah, but technically he.
I mean, there was
has a
structure.
government.
There was structure to that.
Sure.
You know, I mean, yeah, it sounds crazy, but there was order.
But there was no biodefense element to that structure.
Correct. Yeah. Other than
making
the
sure they
fighting
didn't get
style.
infected. Yeah.
Let's give it a 0.5.
Okay.
a 0.5.
I think, have we ever given a 0.5 before?
Nope. First one. All right, 0.5. Oh, we're getting close to the
No.
dreaded.
Don't say it. Don't say it. You're biasing
Not
the
at all. I am
proceedings.
biasing.
You're
You're
introducing
manifesting
bias.
You're manifesting a 3.7.
No, being a bad scientist.
Don't do that
right
to
now.
me.
Okay. Portrayal by the actors is the next category.
Well, Kelson was outstanding.
I think
of course.
I think they're all outstanding, and
I think everybody did a great job. Honestly.
yeah, I don't think there's a single.
Yeah, I didn't find anybody to
Single
be.
thing.
I didn't roll my eyes or anything with
The
anybody.
only potential weakness was that small band of survivors that
The one guy who got infected.
the one guy got infected, and then
Yeah.
the younger man and the pregnant woman who
Yeah.
lived in that community that Jimmy and
Yeah.
his people went to.
Well, usually when I think about this, I'm not thinking about everybody's acting. I'm thinking about like the main characters, and I would be looking. I mean, I don't think it's hard for Spike to act like Spike or Jimmy to act like Jimmy. To be honest, I think for me it was how is Kelson, how is Ray Fiennes going to do portraying a medical doctor, a scientist, somebody testing hypotheses. I think he did a great job. I don't think that there's anything wrong with his portrayal. And I'm sure, there was stuff that was handed to him. Yeah. You will be painted every day that you're on set with iodine, whether you agree with that or not.
Right.
I thought it was all. I would give that a 5. I don't.
Yeah, and I
think
the actor.
How do we improve upon what?
I think the actor who portrayed Samson also did a good job with what he was being asked to do. So
Yeah.
I would say 5.
I would say. I mean, yeah, especially Samson, just being able to. The change in his composure from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, it is such a huge, or from the last film to the end of this film is such a huge transition. I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
I think Kelson did amazing. Even when he was doing his Satan scene, I think it showed.
Oh,
I think he was having a ball. He was having so much fun, but it shows, scientists can have fun too. And
oh, he was not having a ball.
he was having so much fun.
The science of the character.
No, Ray Fiennes was having a ball.
I think the actor was having a ball.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought the character.
No, I thought the
I thought
character
he
was
was
scared to
having
death that he was going to blow it. And
yeah,
he
I
wasn't
think
gonna...
he was very much concerned for his life. I think there.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he was giving his best for that reason. But
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes, I think, had a ball with it.
I think I think everybody.
Maybe
had
that's what
a
came
ball
through.
with
Like
it.
him enjoying it.
I think
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 for portrayal by the actors.
Okay.
And the last category is the direction, production, and writing.
I mean, you've already heard me talk, give props about the writing and the consulting, whoever consulted on this film. Direction, you could tell if you paid attention, and I was thinking back to the previous film, you could probably pick up subtle differences in the directing approach for this film versus Danny Boyle's approach to the previous film. But honestly, it felt like a continuous story from a cinematography perspective.
Except for the pacing.
The pacing was a little different.
But that's okay.
But that was intentional.
You don't want them all to be the same.
Right.
Yeah. And it felt, and that feeling of difference, I think actually improved the film to a certain extent.
I think so too.
Yeah. Reflecting on things like the Aliens or Alien series of movies. On the one hand, you are looking for some of it to be the same. You want that same kind of scare factor. But on the other hand, I mean, after the first movie, it's not like we're surprised at what the alien is doing. We're not surprised at how it gets inside a person and explodes out of the person and all that. So this was different. I applaud the fact that they wanted to do it differently. Each one of these they wanted to do in a different way.
Yeah. I think there's this, really cool story that they have to tell, and kudos to them for taking risks to do it.
So
and
I think the production was good. I think the direction was excellent. I don't know with the writing. There just wasn't that much, dialogue, I don't think.
But I think that makes
the idea.
I think that makes some of the writing even more important.
Mm-hmm.
And I know sometimes it's coordination with the actors. The actors get to kind of help inform the verbal elements of their characters. But again, the way that Jimmy's fingers found ways to engage with infected without getting infected themselves. Just all of Samson's work was nonverbal, but I'm sure there was some direction in the script about the arc of that character. So I give credit, even if the fact that there are stretches where there isn't a tremendous amount of dialogue, I think is important, and the fact that they made it work is impressive. So I would give this a 5.
I would also say 5.
Okay, let's give it a 5.
Okay. That gives us a final score of 3.9.
Oh, whew. Okay.
Barely missed it.
You want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure that's the score we gave 28 years later.
That'd be hilarious. I don't have it in this spreadsheet, but I'll have to go back and check.
But I think it's probably for the same reason. I think everything else was great, and then there was just that government policy
It just
that
tanked
ended up tanks the score.
All right.
Because otherwise it'd probably be in the 4s, right?
Probably. It probably would be in the 4s otherwise. Pretty much everything we rated other than that one category was a 4, other than the relevance to Commissioner Rex, which was a 3.5. So yeah, that's what it is. Well, anyways, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of Biollywood, and we hope you'll join us next time.